Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. So I'm Naba, glad to be here. So those of you, I hope you can hear me. Those of you who were on the Wild Ride event last year might have seen the same slide that you can see now on the screen with 100 million people. So this is the number of people who have been forcefully displaced from their homes and communities and haven't been able to return, sometimes even for decades. I wish I could tell you that this number has gone down this year, but unfortunately it has gone up. It's now close to 110 million worldwide. And majority of them are living like refugees within their home countries, within the border of their countries. Around 35 million of them are refugees, meaning they have crossed the border and living in the neighboring countries. Some of them in the camps, some of them in informal settlements. So these are the people basically running for their lives, seeking protection, and are in need of life-saving support. Next slide, Janice, please. So globally, as I said earlier, the situation hasn't improved, mainly because of ongoing wars and conflicts and violence in several countries, but also the increasing number and intensity of climate-related disasters, as you all are aware, which is also happening in Canada these days. And then the impact of COVID-19 and economic uncertainties. So the needs have greatly outpaced the response, the funding, and the attempts for political solutions. And more crises have become protracted, meaning that they are there for several years and have become complex too, meaning that this is people are affected not only by one crisis, but multiple of crises. Next slide, Janice. So how do PWRDF respond to this worldwide crisis? I think almost all of you who are present here are familiar with these networks of which PWRDF is a part. So PWRDF has a number of long-standing partners around the world, the civil society organizations, like-minded organizations. The ACT Alliance, I think is known to you. I don't need to describe that to you, I hope. The Anglican Alliance, and then the Canadian Food Crisis Bank Network. So all these network and partnerships allow us to be working with the church-based organizations, with the civil society organizations who are rooted in the communities, who are there or almost close to the crisis-affected communities, those internally displaced and refugees. And as you know, PWRDF is not an implementing agency. We're not set up as a with offices overseas or with staff overseas. So this partnership also allows us to work with others jointly, developing policies together, the guidelines, strategies, designing and monitoring projects together, and pooling resources for greater impact and for efficient use of your donations. And the partnership is also inconsistent with our values, the principles of PWRDF, and also also our own capacity as a small or mid-term relief and development agency. Next slide, please, Janice. So today I'll briefly highlight a case of Tanzania, especially a Nyarugusu refugee camp in northern Tanzania near Burundi and Dominican Republic of Congo. I've been to this camp a few times, and most recently in April. And there, as Kim mentioned, is Church World Service. You can see the CWS there, which stands for Church World Service, is a member of the ACT Alliance and a long-standing partner of PWRDF. They have a site office there, working with the refugees. The camp itself is mostly populated by the refugees from Dominican Republic of Congo, but also from Burundi and other countries. Yeah, the Congo, the Dominican Republic of Congo, as you know, is one of the resource-rich countries in the world, but have been experiencing violence and conflict for several years, including some natural disasters. So they have around 6 million internally displaced people and around 1 million people as refugees in the neighboring countries. Tanzania is one of the hosting countries. And here in the Nyarugusu camp, the camp which you can see here is the largest refugee camp in Tanzania, hosting around 150,000 population. And because of resource constraints, and when I was there, there were in April, there were a lot of new arrivals coming, and many of these people are living there since 1990s in the camp. I actually talked to one girl of like 25-year-old, same age as my daughter, who is an extension worker there, and who just grew up there in the camp. So the camp has been her home and the community, and she doesn't know about her home and communities in Congo. So the camp is actually very overcrowded, as hosting 3 times its population of its capacity. And the UN appeal for funding for Tanzania is actually around 38% funded. So they rely on food assistance from World Food Program, but their ration, which is basic staple of maize flour, beans, cooking oil, and salt, is reduced to 80% or sometimes even to 60% from time to time. Because of the overcrowded nature of the camp, they face, the challenges for shelter, the housing, the water and sanitation, and other restrictions as well. Because to move out of the camp, they need to get permit from the government, from the camp commandment. Even for me to get to the camp, I had to get 3 types. I mean, first I had to get approval through Church World Service from the Ministry of Home Affairs of Tanzania, from their central government. And then I had to get a stamp on that letter from their zonal office in Kigoma, for which I had to wait a couple of hours in their office just to get the letter, the permit stamped. And then when I get to the camp, then I need to report to the camp commandment, the government officer who is in charge of the camp. So there are several restrictions to visitors, let alone to visitors, but then even more to the refugee population. Next slide, please, Chance. So what PWRDF is doing with Church World Service there, the funding comes from the Canadian Food Grants Bank with the equity, PWRDF equity there, with the donations from the Anglicans, and then it's matched by the general account. And so this is a 3-year project where Church World Service is working with the extension workers there. So there are 10 extension workers, and they are all drawn from the refugee community themselves. So the idea is, yes, social service is in the forefront, but it's basically a refugee-led response, because the main work is done by the 10 extension workers who have prior experience in the farming, who are kind of role models and has this experience in the motivating others and taking the knowledge to the community. So what they are doing is to do all season vegetable production, where they get trained in the demonstration farms, as well as growing fruit trees and other kinds of trees, multi-purpose trees like neem, moringa. I don't know whether you have heard about them, but they have medicinal values and a lot of other purposes. So they also would provide them with some poles for temporary shelter, and then also firewood. Firewood is also major limitation there, and the refugees women would have to go to host communities to get firewood, and then they get a conflict there as well. So the nursery has provided seedlings of multi-purpose tree species that would also provide them with firewoods. And so the nutrition from vegetable would help them diversify their diets, and also some of them have already started selling to the neighbors and in the market. Next slide, Janice, please. So this is another multi-purpose nursery. So there are 5, in fact, strategically located in different parts of the camp, because the camp itself has many sites, and because 150,000 is a big town in itself. So so there then the farmers are invited for training, and then they experiment vegetable growing, and then seedlings are also distributed from the site. Next slide, Dennis. So the extension worker drawn from within the community is one top layer, and then within that are the lead farmers who are role models, and then they become trainers of their own group members. So here is Lalia. She has been featured in our on PWRDF stories. I also visited her farm and also her family. And the constraint here is, back home when they were in Congo, they had a lot of land, but here they are growing in a tiny plot, and they had to make use of that plot, make most of that plot, and the water, because they are housed in very remote areas, the water is the constraint. You need compost, you need mulching, so almost they had to fight with so many limitations and restrictions. But these lead farmers are going against all these odds. Some of them, like Lalia, have even started shaving seeds of amaranth seed vegetable, the drought tolerant vegetable. Some of the amaranth varieties are drought tolerant, and seed of African nightshade vegetable, the one you can see here. So they are in the forefront, and they are role models to others in the camp. So yeah, next slide, please, Dennis. So that's basically Tanzania. I think I've taken a lot of time for Nyarugusu. So I'll briefly touch on other responses as well. As Kim said, we'll be covering South Sudan later in the next meeting, but in brief, PWRDF has been working with refugees, South Sudanese refugees in, we've worked in with them in Kenya, in Kakuma refugee camp, in Uganda. I know Janice visited them in Uganda as well, in Ethiopia, like that. But we have also been working inside the country with the host communities. Ye is, you can see the cursor there. Ye is where I first went there in Ye in 2009, and then my latest visit was in April, where we've been working with the returnees and the IDPs and host communities. There are other projects up there in the northeast, Malakal, and then in the place like Awel and Wow, where working with the Episcopal Church of South Sudan for both peace building and humanitarian response. Also in there near Awel, there is a place called Renk. There is Diocese of Renk has a theological training center there, and they are hosting a number of returnees from Sudan, both South Sudanese and the refugees. And with Anglican Alliance partners, we're providing some relief support to them. They have started with their own resources, whatever the diocese could raise within from their own resources, and also we're topping up so that they could continue doing that response. We've also worked with the diaspora communities, mainly in Winnipeg, and through them we've supported the Diocese of Bor and also the peace building work of the provincial office. Maybe we should go to the next slide. And Ethiopia, I know my time is running out. So Ethiopia been responding there for several years. Most recently, you might have heard in the news the Tigray conflict since late 2020. It has produced a massive number of internally displaced people and even some refugees who fled to Sudan. So PWRDF is supporting the ACT Alliance appeal with the Lutheran World Federation Ethiopia office, providing water in the internally displaced people's camp, supporting the childcare centers, and supporting the caregivers of those children for income generating opportunities. So next slide, please, Janice. Very briefly, as Kim said, we'll be featuring one of the projects from the Middle East as well. But for now, I just would like to mention that PWRDF, through the equity in the Canadian Food Grants Bank, I hope you you know what equity would mean in the Food Grants Bank. The Canadian Food Grants Bank, we've been supporting the food assistance program in projects in Yemen, being implemented by the Adventist Development and Relief Agency there, ADRA in short, and there's ADRA Canada as well. So we've been partnering with them through the Canadian Food Grants Bank. Iraq, as you know, since 2014, the ISIS inflicted conflict and displacement, and then now there for a couple of years there's lots of returnees, but they return to almost nothing into their community. So Lutheran World Federation there has been working to help the returnees set up the necessary infrastructure, the drinking water, sanitation, and others. So that has been our support to them. Syria, both conflict since 2011-12, and also the recent earthquake. So a number of ACT Alliance members, the Middle East Council of Churches, Christian Aid, HEX is a Swiss agency with an operation there, are working responding to both crisis affected people and also earthquake affected people. We had around 195,000 donations from people like you that has gone in support of the appeals to the work of these ACT members. And Lebanon, you will hear later as well, has a sizable number of Syrian refugees, And I think in terms of per capita, this is the country hosting highest number of refugees. And the Middle East Council of Churches, also an ACT member, is working with the refugee communities there, and part of our support goes to them, and it's also pooled with resources from other ACT members from US and Europe. Yeah, next slide, please, Miss. So Asia, mostly right now, because of the Canadian government policy, sanction policy, PWRDF, and other Canadian civil society organizations are not allowed to work in Afghanistan, but we've been responding to the needs of refugees, the Afghan refugees in Pakistan. The Community World Service is an ACT member and a long-standing partner of PWRDF, so our support goes through them. And then Burma, Myanmar is another country with lots of human rights issues and displacement, both to Thai-Burma border and also to Bangladesh. But they also have a sizable number of internally displaced people. So PWRDF support goes to the Rohingya communities who are internally displaced within the country in Rakhine state. The Lutheran World Federation has an office both in Yangon, but also right in Rakhine, where the internally displaced people are put in the camp, they call cantonment camp, like IDP camp, like refugees. So they've been providing support there. In Bangladesh, the Rohingya are almost 1 million population in Cox's Bazar. So various ACT members are supporting them. And then in Thai-Burma border, in Thailand, the Burmese are also displaced there, and PWRDF has one partner there, the Drug and Alcohol Recovery and Education Project. Next slide, Janice. So Ukraine, I think many of you are aware of the PWRDF response. We've been working with the ACT Alliance members, but also a number of local partner organizations there. There are, I would say, kind of 4 kinds of responses. One is extremely risky in the areas where it is sometimes occupied by Russians, and then it's also cleared by the Ukrainian army. So it's like it falls under one jurisdiction, then comes back to Ukraine. So even their ACT members and with their local partners are providing relief there. And then the other area is the front line itself, the front line or close to front line where active battle is happening. And then the more from east, when you move towards west, and those are areas where people are mostly displaced. But then there are millions of Ukrainians who have now returned from within Europe, returned to Ukraine because they are aware of the risk, but they couldn't continue living as refugees in the other countries. So they have chosen to return, a sizable number of them, but they don't have their original houses and communities are destroyed. So they are the other groups who are in need of support, and that ACT members are responding to them. And then there are others who are still were living as refugees. So the Hungarian Interchurch Action is one of the members who have operations inside Ukraine for almost 2 decades, but also in Hungary, they are with local churches, they are responding to the refugee needs there. And then Church World Service has had office in Moldova, and that was even prior to the conflict. and they are responding to the refugees, especially to the Roma communities there. And so our support goes to the work that they are doing with the Roma communities. So I think I'll end there. Sorry I've gone over time, but thank you for listening, and thank you for your support. I think everything we've been doing is through your support, and we've been able to reach out globally and to many parts of the world. So thank you.